Hello, welcome to episode 2 of VFX Notes. I'm Ian Fowles from beforesandafters.com, and I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi, Hugo. How are you?
I'm okay, Ian. Hi, welcome to episode 2. Thanks for having me again.
We made it. We made it to the second episode,
I know.
Which is pretty cool.
It's always that step, isn't it? Like, is the podcast going to exist? Is there going to be a second episode? Yes, there is a second episode.
There is, and we've got so much to talk about. I'm going to give you a quick heads up, everyone, what we're going to talk about, and then Hugo and I are going to talk about what we've been doing in the past week or two. Today, we're going to discuss some VFX shows and movies we've been watching on streaming, something called F9, some games. We're going to be looking at some tech in VFX, mainly about stylization in animation. I'm going to ask Hugo about what Z-depth is. And we're going to pinpoint some forums for VFX on the web. So that's what's coming up, Hugo. Hugo, what have you been doing in the past 2 weeks?
Okay, so, well, first of all, even before I start, I wanted to thank everyone that has been sending us so much love and so much support, both privately and publicly on social media. People have really been enjoying the podcast. We have been enjoying it and loving it as well. And I just want to thank everyone that has been supporting. They've been great, and I've been getting so much love. But the past 2 weeks, it's been difficult for me. It's one of the reasons why we're a bit behind and a bit delayed, and I apologize that we are delayed because of me. But as a lot of people know, my long friend, my dog Pammy, has died a few days ago. And that's been very difficult for me and my family, for me and Anna. You know, the dog, she's been with us for 16 years and almost 16. She was going to be 16 in next month. And so it's been incredibly difficult. So that's why. So the last 2 weeks have been like a roller coaster of emotions, going from, you know, the loss of a family member to watching films and streaming and other things, you know, to try to distract from all of that. And I guess I did watch the film that could distract the most, because it's the most distracting film in the world, really, to be honest, like F9. Yeah. But yeah.
Hugo, I'm so sorry about your dog. That's really sad news. And
thank you.
It was such a beautiful dog as well. I saw some great pictures of him, her as a puppy.
Yeah, you know me, like awesome. I'm always taking pictures. So I was rounding up the pictures and the footage, and I have like thousands of photos of her, which is nice. I'm going to do an Instagram account just for that. So if people love dogs, they can watch that. So, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, you mentioned a film that you saw. Shall we just talk about this film? It's F9.
Unless
right?
you want to say what
Fast
you've been up to.
film.
Like you also, yeah. Well, we can come back to that. We can come back to that. Yeah, F9. Yeah. For people that don't know, Fast and Furious.
Yeah, the latest Fast and Furious film. Look, I saw this film in Australia a couple of weeks ago at a press screening, which was pretty cool. They had like a whole street party beforehand, and they released these films in a big way, you know, because they're the thing that makes Universal a lot of money, I think, as a franchise film. And they're always a film for me, these Fast and Furious films, where the whole point is to watch them on a big screen. And we did. And, you know, I want to see the effects, the practical effects, the visual effects. I want to see what they're doing, because they're now up to 9, or perhaps there's even really 10 films if you include Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, like, where can they go? I kind of loved Furious 7, you know, which is unfortunately the one where Paul Walker died. But I thought that they nailed that.
Yeah.
But
it was the best one, yeah, for sure.
That was the best one. I'm going to say this one, I kind of struggled. I really struggled, Hugo. Well, I just,
oh God,
just so preposterous. It's really hard to watch.
It's ridiculous.
Except that it's actually a good experience on the big screen.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my first take. What was yours?
It's the most ridiculous thing I've seen in my life. A little caveat, guys. I love Fast and Furious. I've always been, because when I was very young, you know, they first came out. I've always been a sucker for cars. I love cars. And so when the first film came out, I was like, oh my God, this is the best film in the world. obviously it's not. They're all terrible. Most of the time they're terrible. I think, yes, Fast and Furious 7 is pretty good. But this franchise, I have like a love-hate relationship. I think it is terrible, but it's also so comforting. You see,
Yeah.
I know now I have this prisma from my dog dying, but this was the perfect film for me to go and watch because my brain switched off for 2 hours and a half. By the way, it's 2 hours and a half. It completely switched off, and it was exactly what I needed to see. There was 5 people in the room. It's so disturbing to see that there's this. It was a Sunday, and it was only 5 people there. I feel this is really disturbing. Because Britain is open now, cinemas are open, and still people don't go. I feel like this is already a warning that now people are not going to go anymore. And I saw on social media everyone was complaining, why can't I just stream it? Why can't I just stream it? People just want to stream it, So I feel Universal is losing some money there because, and also the ticket was so much cheaper. Usually British tickets are usually like 13, 14 pounds, and it's now 9 pounds. So it is like really disturbing to watch that. But yeah, the film is
just on that though. Just on that though, you say Universal is losing money, but they had the biggest pandemic opening ever.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. Something
so
like
with this, with F9?
million.
Okay.
Yeah, that's America. I think that's not even worldwide.
But you know that this film would have made $1 billion if it was before the pandemic, because they all made $1 billion, all the other ones.
That's true.
So it would have been different conversation. But they're gonna bet on the Blu-ray and the streaming, of course. But yeah, sorry, I went off road. Portuguese, sorry about that. You asked me what I thought. I think it's ridiculous. It is preposterous. It makes no sense. I don't want to spoil it. If anyone doesn't want the film spoiled, maybe scroll a few minutes forward. But I think this is not a spoiler, but because you see that on the posters and everything, they spoiler alert, they go to space. They even go to space. It almost sounded to me like they're now doing 007 when they started going to space as well, because there was nothing else to do on 007, What do you thought about that? All these locations, all these... where do they get all the financing? How can they finance this? Think about it. They move around from country to country with the same cars. Who finances this? Ian, who does that?
I don't think you're meant to think too closely about the story, because if someone asked me to explain what happened or which city they were in each time, there's a huge chase that happens in Edinburgh, and I can't even remember some of that. But look, I don't know if it matters. The whole point is you're kind of meant to be blown away, and you're meant to go, whoa, and you're meant to laugh at the sort of
I know. You saw that they even joked to themselves. You saw there's a bridge jump when the bridge breaks, and then he somehow puts the wheel attached to a wire, and then the car jumps. And then at the end, they say, oh, that's new. Yeah, it is new. They even joke at themselves. I don't know. I have a little small list. The bridge jump, that's new. How do they get financing to all these trips? The script was incredibly convoluted. I kind of thought, where's the bathroom on the villain's cage? The villain is inside a plastic cage. How can she go to the bathroom? It's a plastic cage. Yeah. They go to space. It's a Pontiac Fiora that goes to space. Oh my God, it's a Pontiac Fiora. It's perfect. But yeah, I did stick around for the credits. Obviously, I don't want to, pardon the point, shit on the film too much, because I think the film is, if you want to go for an intellectual thing, you should not go and watch this thing. It's not an intellectual film. It's a film for you to switch off and to have fun. I had a lot of fun. I did. Although I've had more fun with other films from this franchise. I don't think it was fun enough, and I don't think the film was spectacular enough compared to other versions. I don't know, maybe I missed The Rock, maybe I missed the other things that the other films have, but talking about the visual effects, I did stick around for the credits. They were long. Damn, they were so long. And as far as I saw, it's DNEG, ILM, Lola, Factory VFX, and Territory. A few other ones that they were going so fast I couldn't even get it all.
I think it has become a franchise where, they go out and film as much as they can practically, and you see a lot of B-roll of what they film, and it's pretty impressive. Yeah. But if people had no idea about the digital visual effects work, comp and CG, and what's done on a stage, as inserts, what's done on a stage completely, I think people would have no idea. They don't. The articles that tend to come out about the visual effects don't always go into that kind of huge detail. I haven't done a piece yet on the film.
Not much has been out. Not much has been out. No.
Here's a curious thing, though. When the trailer came out, I'm pretty sure it was a trailer, Justin Lin, the director, tweeted a really cool breakdown video at the time. This was a few months ago, of the magnetic thing sequence where they basically pull a car through a shop, into a truck. And what's really cool is, they shot parts of that for real, motion control camera, clearly lots of digital intervention. But I actually kind of really appreciated that the director would publish, a breakdown of that so early.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes in these big films, they often say, oh, we did it all practically, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to covering the film, hopefully, but it was nice to see that VFX breakdown.
I really want to see also the breakdown of space, and I really want to see the breakdown of more of the magnetic parts, which are the most interesting. It's funny, right?
Yeah.
Like when I watched this film and I remember the conversation from last week, which I posted on YouTube and sparked a huge conversation about compositing being dead. You just look at this film. This film is entirely done in location. There's a lot of green screen, of course, but there is so much practical mixed with CG and mixed with real stunts. I stick around to watch the credits. Not only there are thousands of visual effects artists, but there are thousands of stunt performers, like hundreds and hundreds of drivers and everything. As always, Fast and Furious has always been on the brink of that. They've been supporting the industry so much with stunt and also with racing and driving and even music as well. They support so many new artists as well with their soundtracks as well. It's always fresh. And I feel like this franchise is really like a momentous franchise in the cinema. It is not amazing. It's not for you to like. It's not an intellectual film at all, but I think it's really necessary as well. I like to watch comfort films like this and spectacular. And I was very surprised by the amount of companies working on this film. Like I think they're really up their game. I guess Fast and Furious 10 will be even bigger, but they're really going for it. They have DNEG, ILM, Lola, Factory. Like it's a lot of big hitters on this show. It was a massive VFX show. I think every shot somehow has visual effects. It's insane. And
I totally agree.
What did you thought about the younger parts? That's a funny thing that I really like that they didn't do a young Vin Diesel in CG. I like that they cast another actor. I miss that. I miss those things. I really enjoy that.
That was good. I'm not convinced that there's no alterations done.
There probably is. That's why Lola is there. I'm sure there is, but there were definitely other actors. They were not the same.
They were.
Yeah.
Look, those sequences, the flashbacks, and that's a bit of a spoiler, but
we did warn.
Great.
We did warn.
Yeah,
it was the best part, right? It was the best part. It was the best part.
The story points were the best parts.
It connected to the old films as well, because I really love the simplicity of the old films, especially the first and the second. They are really the best ones because they're not special agents. They're just race people, And I feel like it was nice to go back to the racing track and to go. I really liked the cameo from that actor from Days of Thunder. You saw that? What was his name? There's like the guy, the mechanic with the father. I cannot remember his name. Forgive me for that. But the main actor that is the mechanic with the father and the sons, and the guy that takes care of the younger brother. That guy was one of the drivers of Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise. So it's funny that they brought him in because it's definitely an homage to Days of Thunder, because that entire sequence is a Days of Thunder homage, completely.
Hugo, are you ready for something that's gonna kill you?
I never saw it.
I've never seen Days of Thunder.
Okay. Well, as a person that loves speed, you should go and watch Days of Thunder.
I just, for some reason, never caught it.
You should watch it. You should watch it. You'll be surprised by how good it is. It is very good. It's a good film.
Okay. I believe you.
You should go and watch it.
Let's move on quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just talk about these quickly. But I have also been consuming because it's available in the last couple of months, so much streaming stuff. And obviously, particularly what's been happening with Marvel.
Yeah.
I mean, I really actually loved WandaVision.
Yeah.
I got into Winter Soldier and Falcon. Not as much because I feel like they tinkered a bit with the storyline there.
Mm-hmm.
Loki, which is ongoing, I love the first 2 episodes. Third episode, not as good.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed what they've been doing with these standalone series. What about you, Hugo? Have you been able to catch all those?
I have, yeah, I have. I've been watching all of them. I'm still very behind on Winter Soldier. Loki, I'm up to speed. I've watched all 3 that have been out now. And WandaVision, I just need to watch the last episode because I've watched only the first 8 episodes, so I didn't watch the finale yet. So yeah, well, first of all, it's like a barrage. There's so much to watch. That's the thing. Like I'm always a bit overwhelmed by the amount of things that we have to watch on both Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus. Not that I'm complaining, but it's just so much that it's difficult to catch up. Let me start with Loki. I feel like Loki, just like you said, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I thought the 2 episodes were really cool with a lot of conversation. I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but it was a lot of conversation, a lot of backstory, and the entire environment, which, let's be honest, it's exactly like Brazil mixed with a Terry Gilliam film. You know, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a surreal Brazil / the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy. You know, it's almost like the bureaucracy and the paperwork, and it's a lot of fun. It is. Even the end titles that they've made, which are really pretty and really beautiful. You know.
Although you kind of feel like with WandaVision that they're setting us up to be like, well, that's all a ruse and it's something else. I mean, we kind of expect it to be, right? Because it's a mystery. He's solving a mystery. He's meeting someone.
Exactly. But I just like you with the third episode, I have some problems. And I feel, for me, I don't want to disrespect anyone that has been on this production. And I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but the visual effects are great, but they don't look mind-blowing, and the editing doesn't look mind-blowing, and the acting doesn't look very good, and even the fight choreographies look very lame. I just feel that there's something off with that episode. I don't know if it's in purpose, but even when they're walking outside the train and everything, it just looks the whole thing looks a bit low budget and a bit cheap, and I only felt that on episode 3. And I think it's because the sequences weren't incredibly choreographed. I don't know. Maybe it's, we shouldn't be complaining because this is TV shows. And obviously I'm comparing it to an Avengers film. And I cannot compare that because an Avengers film is $1 billion production, like 300 million. Obviously this is not 300 million. And you can really feel that the money that they spend on visual effects and choreographies and fight sequences in Avengers cannot be spent here because this is just a TV show. But it really gives you a disconnect, because you see the same actor, you see the same production, the same logo, and you're expecting it to look the same. You know what I mean? But it doesn't. So I felt a little bit disappointed from that sense in Loki.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's building up to something bigger.
Could be.
And
maybe I'm gonna eat my words. I'm sure I will. I have done that before. It's funny though, like, have you seen anything about the visual effects of this? Because I do know that they're using volumes and I do know that they're using LEDs, but I have not found anything yet. They haven't released anything yet, have they?
Well, what? No, because the approach that Disney and Marvel have had with discussing the shows has been that they make their own making of. Mm-hmm. That gets published on Disney Plus, and then, at least from a visual effects point of view, they allow journalists to talk to the artists or the VFX soup and publish some stories, and then they also publish their own video interviews, which is always like a couple of weeks after the show. So, I mean, I can't wait to cover it, but I won't be covering it until the end of the series, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they'll probably release some behind the scenes like they did with Mandalorian. You know, that's the thing.
Yeah, right at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is fine. Although that brings up an interesting thing, which I did want to quickly mention to you. I love that these shows are week by week.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I'm sure that I've enjoyed all the Netflix shows that get released all at once. You know, I binge them, whatever. But there is something awesome, isn't there? And we might have talked about this last week.
Yeah.
In terms of like, oh, that episode was just on, let's see what the internet thinks about it. I chat with my friends on WhatsApp and Messenger. Oh, what did you think? What did you think? You know, that doesn't happen as much with the shows that you binge all at once. So I kind of like that we're back to that network television type approach.
Yeah. I know people get frustrated by that, but I really feel it's just like Game of Thrones, you know? The anticipation of waiting for the episode. On Game of Thrones, I was watching it here in the UK, which was Sky Atlantic, and I was watching it at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, which was exactly at the same time as the US. The anticipation, and obviously now these days we don't go to work and then talk about it the morning after. We go to Twitter, you know. And I feel like Twitter is now like the water cooling place, you know, like we used to have a water cooler and we used to talk about things. Now it's Twitter. And it's funny that I really love the anticipation. I really love to talk about it with friends of mine the day after. And then some people are still catching up. Because the thing with binging is that everyone would watch the whole thing in one night and then spoil everything on Twitter. And I hate that.
Yeah,
I really hate that. I'm an old-fashioned guy in that sense. I am like you. I really like I don't mind at all. There's so much to watch. I don't mind that I'm waiting a week. What's the problem? You know, I feel like it's really enjoyable, and I wish I would have done that with WandaVision because I've been watching it all in a row because it's been out for a long time. But I also watched Mandalorian like this once per week as well. It was really nice. It felt like I could. Good, isn't it? Yeah, and also it makes you think more about the episode as well, because these are not supposed to be films. They're supposed to be shows, and you're supposed to watch one, think about it, and then watch the next one. You know.
Yeah. Awesome. Hugo, what about briefly on games? I'm not a gamer, but I know that you keep up with the latest things. What's happening in that world, just briefly?
Before I jump to the game, I just wanted to really briefly talk about a show that everyone needs to go and watch. It's a bit old, but just wanted to make sure everyone goes and checks. I've just finished with Anna, with my wife, a TV show called Cardinal. That was a TV show from Canada. Okay. Everyone should go and watch it. It's a beautiful show. Currently it's free on iPlayer here in the UK. I'm not really sure where it is in the rest of the world. You know, you guys
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, Cardinal is 4 seasons only. It's already done. It was finished in 2020. It adapts really good novels from a crime writer called Gilles Blunt. And it's 4 books and it's 4 seasons. Each book is a season, I believe. And it's basically 2 detectives, John Cardinal, which is played by Billy Campbell, and then Liz Delorme, which is played by Karina Vanasse. And it's basically this really gritty, dark, very dark environment, crime drama, which is with amazing acting. Cinematography is amazing as well, with a lot of depth of field effects and transitions and really good music. It was a huge surprise. Me and Anna always watch crime drama, and this really, the production level is so much higher than everything else. It's beautiful. So everyone should go and check it out. I know it's old, but it started in 2015, and it finished just now. Yep. Go and check it out.
Any visual effects in it?
It does, yeah, of course. It has some matte paintings. It has like some background stuff as well. But I guess the majority of the work is really very good camera work. Very good camera work, but obviously it has visual effects. It does, because I've seen some and I saw it on the credits, but it's not a visual effects heavy project. No, I just wanted to mention because we were talking about streaming, and if anyone wants to go and check it. So video games really briefly. If anyone doesn't want to listen about video games, they can just like switch a few minutes off. First of all, E3 was a few weeks ago. E3 was, I only have a few things to say. It was completely underwhelming. Xbox was really the only big show in town. Nintendo was also good, but this is the first time we had E3. E3 is the biggest show of video games. I used to go physically to E3 every year. It's in LA. It used to be in LA. And this year, because of pandemic, they didn't do it physically. They did it in streaming. And it was really underwhelming. Almost no one showed up to show anything really cool. PlayStation wasn't even there. Xbox did show a lot of things that were the best of the show. But I have a feeling, Ian, that these shows, especially E3, Gamescom, all these big gaming shows are dead. I don't think it's going to happen anymore. I feel now, because of streaming shows, because of the events that we have all over the year, I don't feel we're going to have these big events in June or big event in November. We're only going to have multiple events scattered through the year. Things have really changed with COVID-19, and E3 was a victim of it. There was almost nothing about it. Almost no one cared really about E3, So,
well,
which is funny.
I mean, possibly that's because they were worried about getting infected by being in a room.
I'm not suggesting people should have went.
I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong about that, except I understand what you're saying, that some of these conferences, including games, including visual effects, including computer graphics, they've found a different audience online.
They did.
And the people that used to pay thousands of dollars to go to these events don't want to do that anymore.
I know.
Or they found a different way to connect. On the other hand, I'm quite sure people do love connecting at these events.
We miss that, don't we? Like, I miss it a lot. Yeah. I miss FMX so much, and I miss View Conference, and I miss, just talking with people, going to the piano bar on FMX and chatting with people, and it's just so different. And E3 was the same. There was also bars and coffee shops that we used to go and chat with other developers, and it was also like the only moment that we could even meet some people that so it was a bit sad in that sense, but I don't want to spend much time about it. Like, the last thing I wanted to mention about gaming is that I've been playing a game called Ratchet and Clank, Rift Apart, which we talked about last time. If anyone has the opportunity, this is the most beautiful game I've ever played in my life. It's literally a moving Pixar movie. We talked about this last time. Yeah. It's just mind-blowing in terms of ray tracing, in terms of full high-quality assets. All the models are incredibly detailed. You zoom in and there's all the little fur and everything is still there. It's all running at 60 frames per second. It's just, even the camera work, even the story, the jokes, it's literally an animated movie, either Pixar or DreamWorks, in motion, but it's all online render. It's all real-time engines. I know we talked a lot about real-time engines, but yeah, this is very impressive. We have an interview with one of the developers of the game to put on the show notes. You guys should check it out. He really talks a lot about the technology, especially the technology that has to do with the SSD that these consoles have, which is really a way to read the assets in such a quick way that they can load these big high poly assets really quickly. And that really changed the game. The entire game is built around that because it's about rifts where you can jump from portal to portal. And so the SSD is so quick that it allows you to load the game and load the levels really quickly. And it's very impressive. I don't want to talk much about it, but you guys should. I'll put, obviously, as you guys know, on YouTube, you'll have all the clips. I'll put a bunch of clips of this game while we're discussing it now. There will be a visual version of this podcast on YouTube, and you can watch some of the clips that I've been playing,
It's interesting we're talking about it again, because that's a good segue into our next topic, which is the biggest thing in VFX tech right now. Now, the thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Hugo, isn't necessarily the biggest thing in VFX tech right now, but it's something that you and I think, had both observed in animated films, and this is the link to Ratchet, is stylization. Yeah. If you've been watching a few big films recently, and really I think a lot of people notice this mostly with Into the Spider-Verse, is that whereas animated films seem to be going for, super ray traced quality photoreal, but also cartoony photoreal for many years, I feel like, and this is almost a pretty obvious observation, things have pivoted back to trying to be as stylized and as 2D in some ways as possible. One of the obvious films recently was Sony Animation's The Mitchells versus the Machines, which is a Netflix film, but it was made by Sony Pictures Imageworks essentially. Full of little stylization efforts by the production designer, by the whole team, by the director, by everyone, just to give it that sort of more, I keep saying stylized, but that's exactly what they were going for. Have you noticed that, Hugo, just as much in, some of these animated films around the place?
I have, of course. I will never forget when I went to a Visual Effects Society event where they showed PaperMan for the first time. I went. It was an event years ago here in London where the director was there and he spoke about his project. He had a keynote and then he showed the film. And I'll never forget it. Our jaws dropped to the floor. It's so funny, that event, because we had to leave our phones on the entrance. We couldn't even take our phones inside. Right. It was very secretly, because it was like it was going to go to the Oscars and no one could talk about it. And this was such a long time ago. I think it was like 5 years ago or 4 years ago or something like that. And I'll never forget it. And I looked at that. And even myself back then, I was already talking a lot about this with my clients, and because I was doing a lot of game cinematics at that time with Fire.Smoke and with Ubisoft and with Dam's Buster as well. And we also discussed a lot that I feel like the stylization, this kind of style, of course, now everyone looks at Spider-Verse, but I think PaperMan was the first one. Spider-Verse was really the pivotal moment where it came to everyone saw it, everyone noticed it, I personally feel like stylization is a reflection where we were heading. Because if you think about it, I've always hated the fact that people pursue perfection in CG all the time. I've never been interested on that, because I feel that photorealism ends up becoming the last year's news. Like whenever you do something photoreal, in a couple of years, it doesn't look photoreal anymore. Just look back. If you look back and you look at some of the CG trailers from games that looked photoreal before, now they look ridiculous. Look at Toy Story, looked really real back then, and now you look at Toy Story 4 and it's a joke compared to in terms of the shaders. Mm-hmm. And I feel that stylization, like PaperMan, like Mitchells and Machine, like Spider-Verse, is a response to the creative. It's a creative response, because films need to last a long time. Films should last and the test of time, and photorealism does not last the test of time. Stylization does. Yeah. I think that's why you see all these creatives now starting to do it, because they know, Spider-Verse in 30 years from now, it's still going to look mind-blowing, But other films won't.
I think I know what you... I definitely agree with you, and I think it's even further than that. In the case of Spider-Verse and Mitchells vs. Machines, and of course Paperman, part of it is the story. I mean, in Spider-Verse, it's a comic book representation in some ways. Yeah. In Mitchells, the main character, she's a artist who sketches and draws, so some of it is reflective of that. But I think also, isn't it, this desire to go back to a love of hand-drawn 2D animation, which doesn't really exist in at least the Hollywood side of things as much anymore.
I know.
It exists in a lot of other places.
But it's funny, right? It's funny because we spent all these years staying away from hand drawing. And you look at there was a couple of years there that Ghibli was the only place still making 2D stuff, which I love. They were beautiful. Their films, for Miyazaki, they were like the pinnacle. They were at the Oscars all the time, and everyone else was doing full CG. I'm not saying that you should not do full CG. Obviously, it's a really good point, Ian. These films specifically, they are meant to be done this way because their stories are supposed to be taught that way. Spider-Verse helps the story to be drawn like this. Obviously, you shouldn't force it. You shouldn't force just for the sake of it, But I feel like the abandonment of 2D was a bit harsh. I felt it was a bit harsh because we shouldn't have left it completely. If you look at the big classics like Akira And like all the films from Ghibli and all the productions that France have created, from Asterix and the Obelix, and all these really beautiful productions done by hand, hand drawn, they shouldn't. Everyone just abandoned it completely, and now we're all trying to come back to it and trying to pick up the pieces. And I feel it has to do with the fact that nothing beats the creative input of hand drawing. And I know it's not really hand drawing. It's done by a computer. It's done with the help of artificial intelligence. I know that it's helped with a lot of tools, but those are just tools, like it is still the organic nature they're trying to recapture that we lost, especially on the year 2000s, where films started looking so generic. Animation films I'm talking about started to look so generic. So I really love this. I love, because I'm a sucker for 2D. I'm from Portugal, and Portugal has a huge tradition of 2D animation, even in school. I come from an art school. We used to do 2D animation at school. They've always had a lot of directors on that. France, we have a huge connection with France. France always had a lot of 2D animation. They still do. They still have degrees on 2D animation. And I felt like most of and even volume animation, if you look at Hollis and Gromit and everything, I just feel like sometimes I don't want to sound like the old man, like the little GIF, like the little meme of Simpsons with the old man complaining. I don't want to sound like the old man, but I sometimes feel people advance the new technology too quick, and they never try to either keep using some technology or adapting it or merging it. I just feel that everyone was too quick to drop 2D, and it is funny that now we're all coming back to it.
I mean, just to be clear, the films we're talking about, they're animated in 3D.
Of course,
it's just that they tend to be bringing back some stylized sections to it. Yeah. One thing that I observed a couple of weeks ago was that Disney Animation, which was behind PaperMan, and they used a tool there called Meander. Yeah. I think has another short called Far From the Tree coming out. Maybe it was released at Annecy. Yeah. The other thing that is really great is that some of these big studios are really showcasing and getting much more into non-photorealistic rendering. Pixar's RenderMan has a lot of those options now. One company I always like to look up is Lollipop Shaders, which do a lot of that NPR stuff. Yeah, I really love it. And actually, it's funny, Hugo. One of the things I observed once was what film was I watching? But I can't remember what it was. I bought the art of book before I saw the film, and those art of books that have concept art and production design, and it was so beautiful. And then when I watched the film was actually beautiful, but it didn't feel at all like the art of book. Right? Yeah. So I did the same thing with Mitchell's versus the Machines. The art of book feels like the film, and the film feels like the art of book, which I think is a really cool thing. And that's sort of where we might be heading more with this kind of design stylization.
The funny thing, I'm so glad you said that. I have hundreds of art books all scattered here to my office, which is a pain when I move. I feel like the best in the past, before we had this big stylization renaissance, before I used to buy art books because I knew the concept art was always better than the film. Always, at all times. Whenever you look at a film, not even just animation, but even a film, whenever you look at the concept art from a Blade Runner film, or even whenever you look at the concept art from a Star Wars film, the concept art always looks better than the final result.
And okay,
it does.
Keep going.
It does. And I feel like the concept art, and I feel like that because I think I have a theory, and I think that has to do with this conversation. My theory is that when we're doing concept art, and I've done it many times for my own productions, it's a much more intimate situation. You are either by yourself or with a concept artist. There's only 2 or 3 people involved in the production. It's very artistic. You're not having any boundaries of production. You have no boundaries of budget. You have no boundaries of problematic things you might have on set. You just draw the raw image that you want it to be with no implications. Can we do it? No one cares if we can do it. It's just drawn. It's a drawing. It costs the paper or the file on the computer. Depends on how you've done it physically or not physically. And that is the most pure creative part of the production, and that's why sometimes they look so beautiful. And then somehow, especially in animation, when we then hand over this to a group of 400 people that are going to work on the production, it gets diluted and diluted and diluted, and at some point at the end it doesn't really look as good. Why? Because not only did it has the dilution of all these artists, it has the dilution of all these seniors, but then it has the dilution of the clients, it has the dilution of marketing, it has the dilution of the productions, it has the dilution of the CEO of the company. It starts to become more and more sanitized, and by the time you look at it, it's just a CG frame. That's my personal opinion, and that's how I feel when I look at these things. That's why I think there's this renaissance.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And what's interesting is that these big studios are doing it, but a lot of that stylization stuff you can now do, with apps. I mean, you could always do it in Photoshop or whatever.
Frame by frame. But you can. I've met people that have done that,
Yeah. There's a couple of really fun ones to look at and try out. One is called Ebsynth, which I think people might have already tried. And there's some AI machine learning type ones too, something called StyleGAN from Nvidia. And they just also released, I think it was their GoGAN tool became Canvas, which is not, I mean, it's a bit different than stylization, but it's about brush strokes turning into stylized paintings or realistic paintings. So what I like is that you can often try these out now, and there's always this extra research at SIGGRAPH and elsewhere about turning realistic scenes into stylized scenes. So it just feels like there's always something bubbling in relation to this area.
What were you going to say? Because you weren't going to disagree with me about the concept art. Please let me know. What were you going to say?
I mean, I totally agree with you about how it tends to be a personal type approach to concept art. Something that a Star Wars, a concept artist has time to produce an amazing image, and then it goes through lots more hands. But there are definitely times where it's enhanced, and made better and fits into the story better. Because I'm sure that there's some concept art around that has ridiculous fins on a spaceship that aren't necessary, just because they could draw them. I mean, something like that. But
I totally agree with that. I understand what you mean. I understand. I feel, I think this is a problem, a personal problem, because I feel like I'm starting, now that I'm getting older and I've done so many big productions and I'm now doing smaller and smaller productions, I personally start feeling that I've lost track of what I was doing, and sometimes I lose the artistic edge that I was trying to approach, and exactly because the teams are too big and there's too many people involved, and I feel like concept art is the most closest you get to a personal project almost, which usually those are the ones that look the best because you have more time and you're putting your own sweat and you're putting your soul into it, So I don't mean to disrespect anyone, because I do agree with you, Ian, that there's a lot of films that have benefited greatly by having amazing artists after the fact, obviously. But I just think that I really love this new renaissance, because I feel that we're reaching something new, and we could still have the CG, but we also can have this. And there was a time in the 2000s, between the 2000 2010s, and that I just felt that people abandoned all these things, and they didn't need to abandon them. They could have refought them. They could have still used them. And it just hurts my soul whenever I look at cartoons, whenever I switch on a children's cartoon TV show, it's all this really crap CG instead of the beautiful hand-drawn stuff that we used to see when we were younger. And I understand it's more expensive, but something has really definitely been lost by that. When I was younger, everything was hand-drawn, from Hanna-Barbera to Transformers to G.I. Joe. Even crappy stuff like G.I. Joe was hand-drawn.
Okay, Hugo, we should move on. I want to ask you a tech question. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast, when I get to learn something new, and hopefully listeners do as well. Hugo, what is Z depth? It's a thing I hear all the time, of course, for many years in visual effects. I feel like I only have a cursory understanding of what it is, how it relates to rendering, to compositing. Do you want to give a pretty quick overview of it and see if you can help me understand it more?
Of course. Just wanted to let you know that I've actually got a lot of messages privately from the last week from Gamma of people really emailing me and saying, I'm so glad you explained me Gamma because I didn't understand what it was.
Well, I was too.
So people are really
very helpful.
Okay, so ZDEP, I'm really glad you asked me this because I do love ZDEP. Before I even say anything, just want to make sure everyone understands I'm doing this off script, so I might say something wrong. Please don't take it too harshly. I'm not reading Wikipedia or reading anything in context. I'm just talking out of my brain right now directly. So apologize if I've made any mistake. But ZDEP really, I need to start by just explaining people why it's called ZDEP first, even before we explain what ZDEP is. So normally on a CG application, you have Y, X, and Z, or ZX and Y, depending on the software, which usually tends to be X is side, Y usually is up and down, and Z is going inwards and outwards in depth. Mm-hmm. So Z, depending on the software, of course, some softwares are reversed. If you talk about Nuke, for example, Z is into the camera or out of the camera. So it's like space, it's like depth. It's like when you're looking at something far away. That's why it's called Z depth, because it's the perception of depth in that space. Now, what is Z depth really in CG? So if we think about it in CG, when you're rendering something in a 3D application, you can render the image, in color, in red, green, and blue, but you can also have some extra layers to support you. We tend to call these AOVs or support layers or utility passes, Sometimes they're called render layers, sometimes they're called utility passes or AOVs. ZDEP is one of the oldest ones, and that comes from CG, even before we had really fancy AOVs like speculars and all the different lights and all the separation. And when you look at it directly, it's nothing more than a grayscale image, right? So most of the time, it's almost looks like a fog, Ian. When you look at fog, you see something near you, it's clear, and then it kind of goes into whiteness on the back. Especially if you're in London, you watch the London fog.
Yeah, right.
It's a bit like that. So basically, this layer is a representation of the same CG scene from the same camera, but you basically see everything is close to camera is very whitish, and then as progressively goes far away from camera, it goes darker and darker. By the time it goes to black, that means it's so far away from camera that it's not even visible. So it tends to be, that's how we visualize it, that's how we see that pass. And this pass, so that's what Z-depth is. It's like a grayscale, it's almost like a ramp of color. And what can you do with it? Well, you can do a bunch of things. You can drive depth of field on different applications. You can do that in Nuke, in Fusion, and After Effects, because this is like a map of the location of the camera if you're near an object or far away from an object using black and white values. Somehow this can be connected, I'm really oversimplifying it. This can be connected to plugins, both in Fusion, Nuke, After Effects, that read this data of black and white, and they can calculate where depth of field can be. And then using this map, they can calculate that you can defocus the foreground or defocus the background or defocus the middle ground. So that's the first use that you can use using Z-depth passes to mimic depth of field. Because as most of the audience knows, depth of field is very expensive in render. It takes a long time to render depth of field. So a lot of times in productions, we do depth of field in compositing instead, not only because it's faster, but it's also easier to tweak, because a lot of times you want to animate the depth of field to do what we called a rack defocus, when you basically change focus from one character to the other, like you see in films, depending on the story. So it gives you flexibility after the render is done to animate those rack defocus and those depth of fields, which are incredibly hard to animate in 3D. It's really hard to do that. So that's part one, how you use it in CG and CG compositing. There's another thing you can use with this map. Since this is a black and white map that looks like a fog, you can do two extra things. One of them is you can mimic fog by using this layer. You can merge it or use it to control the color corrector and lift the blacks and basically pretend that you're making fog. And then you can colorize it with blues or greens or whites or yellows if you want to. So it's also very useful for color correction, for you to mimic atmosphere. You know, when you watch something in the early morning, you always have a sense of atmospheric. You know, you have like the objects more far away or a bit washed out, and the objects near to you, they're not as washed out. This is how you can use this Z-depth pass to make that washing out progressively into the distance. And so those are the two types of things you can do with the Z-depth. Now, if we go a little bit deeper into it, these days, obviously back in the day, you can only do Z-depth passes on CG, but these days there are softwares that can create Z-depth passes from footage. Especially, for example, that's how the Kinect from Xbox works. You know, it has two cameras and it recreates a depth pass from what it's watching. There's a lot of more, much better tools to do this these days. But that's also like possible. There's a lot of companies in the world trying to create a depth pass. And you see that even in some cameras, which even on the iPhone, you saw that on the iPhone, you can now apply depth of field after the fact. And that's also done through this technology. Somehow the camera can calculate a depth map and then use that depth map to do depth of field on the photo on your phone. So this is my oversimplified version. I hope you understood it, Ian.
No, that's really useful. And of course, I have covered, productions that have used a Z-depth pass, for many years. And for a while, the conversation often turned to, in recent times anyway, deep compositing.
Yeah.
Which is something slightly different, of course, than a Z-depth pass. Deep compositing came to the fore via Weta Digital, but then also a couple of other companies, and then, was part of Nuke. I sort of wondered as well, like deep compositing was this thing we talked about so often, and then now it's kind of like, I don't want to say it, but it's kind of just like run of the mill. Is that your experience as well, Hugo, or is it still considered an amazing thing?
No, it's still considered an amazing thing, and it's still used to this day to all the big productions. If you look at any film by ILM, Veta, by any other big company, the Mill, MPC, they're all using deep because it is so much more flexible to do compositing using deep. We can do maybe the deep explanation on another day for another tech conversation because it is very different from depth. Depth is one thing and deep is another. But I will tell you for a fact, because I talk a lot with the people of the industry as well, it's definitely being used on almost every production. It's just that for some reason it stopped being talked about because it's now just part of the pipeline, and I think it's just a
checkbox that you do.
Exactly.
You just do it.
But having said that, there are still a lot of productions that don't do it because there are massive implications using deep in terms of storage and speed. And so, for example, I've been in productions lately that I've chosen not to do deep because it was too big. The files were too big, and it was too hard to share the files around on remote workflows. It was not as easy to develop deep compositing. So the choice was made to do regular compositing inside of deep. Obviously, it had some other problems that came because not using deep, but there are some productions that are making choices depending on the time they have and depending on the space they have and the storage. And also you need a faster computer and a more powerful computer to read deep data because it's so heavy.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
We might come back to deep compositing and a bit of a history on it another time.
Yeah, I think we should.
But thank you for the Z-depth discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. The final part of our podcast today is actually one that I'm really interested in diving deep into with you, Hugo. And that is a discussion about forums on the internet
Yeah.
and places for information about visual effects, where VFX artists or people who are interested in visual effects or aficionados want to share some information. I've been obsessed with visual effects really since the late 90s. And I felt like because that was still the early days of the internet, a bunch of places popped up very quickly and were actually really good places to talk about visual effects. And now I think, it's a different kettle of fish. There's just so much social media. There's YouTube, there's Discord, there's Twitch. I just wanted to talk to you, Hugo, about what you thought was a good place for people to go to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start, though, go back to the late 90s.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one place I used to go to every day was a user group, a Usenet group. I don't know how to call it these days, but it was called alt.movies.visual-effects. It was incredible because real visual effects artists jumped on it and, answered questions and said things that probably today their NDAs would not allow them to say. Believe it or not, a lot of the conversations are still available on Google Groups, which seem to buy a bunch of the Usenet. I keep saying Usenet, but I think it's Usenet groups. And you can actually find some old conversations. Did you ever go to those at all, Hugo?
No, I didn't. No,
20 years ago?
I didn't. So I'll let you know. Like in Portugal, internet was quite late. Everything was late in Portugal because we left a regime, a fascist regime, in the late 70s, and then everything kind of started trickling in.
Right.
So I only started having actual internet in my house in the 2000s, and it was incredibly expensive. I used to go to like coffee shops as well, but like internet cafes, but it was incredibly expensive, so I couldn't really be scrolling around. I'd never heard of this one, Alt Movies Visual Effects. I haven't. Maybe it's because it's before my time, or maybe it's because my location in Portugal, people really were not connected to these kind of things,
There are a few others that I also love visiting, which were much more classic forums that people will know about. CG Talk, which is still around as part of CG Society, was pretty cool.
But that's not the same.
It had real visual effects artists in there answering questions. VFX Talk for a while was pretty cool too.
Yeah, VFX Talk was my place. It was my place to go. Like I met most of my friends, and I became quite maybe infamous. I became quite famous or infamous at VFX Talk because I was always constantly there putting tutorials and putting tips, and met a lot of people from Digital Domain over there. A lot of people from Digital Domain were like Aruna and a bunch of other people. So you can't find it anymore. VFX Talk is dead. But I find it's funny. I was yesterday watching my old emails. I have all the threads on my email because they used to go to my email, so I can still read them there, a part of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, VFX Talk was the biggest place for me. CG Talk, not so much. It was really VFX Talk that I... But it's funny, like you said, people really shared a lot of things that even pipeline tools, even tutorials, even plugins, documentation, things that would never be shared these days, ever. Sometimes we even had documents from companies over there, which is preposterous thinking about it now. But I really miss VFX Talk, I do.
Yeah. I suppose today, apart from just what gets posted on social media, because that's Twitter and Facebook are in a way just big, huge forums.
Yeah.
One of the main VFX forums that I still visit pretty much daily is Reddit and the subreddit of VFX. Now, I'm the first to admit that there's so much crap on there, right? Because that's the nature of Reddit.
Yeah.
Lots of posts, some of it useful, much of it not.
Yeah.
But if you wade through the VFX subreddit, I think there's a lot of useful things on there.
Yeah.
Often for newbies, I think.
Yeah.
But occasionally it gets into some quite deep visual effects conversations. I was actually just looking at it before we got online, Hugo. I happened to find this chat about the film Independence Day and some work done by some very high-level VFX artists now who are now at, one of them's now at ILM, but in the day he was at a much smaller company working on Independence Day, where he really like just answered it in full technical detail. People just love that stuff because it's not in an article. It's on Reddit.
Yeah.
So I sort of like going to Reddit. What's your take on Reddit? It's a bit of a hodgepodge of stuff, isn't it, sometimes?
It is, yeah. I don't really like Reddit. I don't, because there's so much people hiding behind these really weird names and really making really trash talk. I really don't like trash talk, and a lot of times there's just people complaining, and I've had problems on Reddit as well, people attacking me as well, and attacking my channel, attacking my course, and I just been staying away from it because there's a lot of people there that have different, like they have like secondary intentions with these things. Obviously, you can find some cool stuff, but Reddit is really become for me a cesspool of problems. It's just like a lot of people that are really not nice. And I feel that is why, a bit of a segue to what we were talking about, Discord and Patreon, I feel now more and more people are looking for private forums. That happens a lot, especially with Patreon, with Discord channels, where it's a lot more catered and it doesn't go off the bandwagon, so to speak. Like I talk that from experience. I've had a Patreon for years, and a few years ago, someone, it was like 4 years ago, someone told me like, "Oh, you need to do a Discord channel." And I said, "Discord? What is that? Let me Google." I didn't even know what it was, And then I went and Googled it, and I saw what it was, and I made the Discord channel, started having some people. At the time, I only had like 100 Patreons, and so they all came. And to this day, like, it's been growing and growing, and now I have 2 Discord channels. I have my public one, which is a bit more messy because there's a lot of people. There's like close to 1,500 people there. But then the private one, which is only for my students, only my students of my course, that one has like 500 people over the years. And it's really nice because it's a really nice community. We all help each other. People post jobs. It really has a life of its own. I am there and I talk with people, but there's so many students of mine that have made that thing. They've posted job offers, they've posted opinion pieces, they talk to each other about other YouTube videos, about Reddit, about this, about that. It really became a community. A lot of them became really big friends and help each other a lot. And I feel now these days, not just my Patreon, my Discord channel, but also Ludo's Discord channel and a couple of other ones. I feel like people really prefer a more private, catered thing. That's how I
right.
feel.
And the obvious reason for that is if there's a crazy person on there, you'll not let them be on there.
Yeah, exactly.
You can control it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like checking out your Discord, and another one I often see is CG Wiki, which is Matt Estella's one.
Yeah.
Ludo from DNEG had a great one called Keep Calm, I'm in VFX.
Yeah.
Some of the hardest things though is keeping it going.
Yeah.
Because you really need the moderator to do that, and that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
People get busy. I think during the beginning of the pandemic, people had a lot of spare time, and then now it's got a bit busier. So I think there are some great places to visit out there forum-wise for VFX artists. You just have to find them. We'll obviously link to some of these in the show notes.
And I would love for people to suggest, I would love for people to send us if they have a cool private Discord or a cool, nice place that they hang out and they think that there should be more people on that. Just send it to us, to me and Ian, because we can talk about it next time and we can post it on our own social media. I'm all up for supporting these places, but I just send it to us because I don't know what's going on there because it's so hard to find things on Discord. You can't really find things, you have true. You kind of have to ask the artist if they have one or check if they have one. But when you look at the bio on Discord or on Instagram, or if you look at the bio on Twitch, then you see the Discord thing,
Yep. Totally agree. So people send in your Discords or your forums that we should look at.
Yeah.
Hugo, we've come to the end
I
of
know.
episode 2, which is amazing. We made it again. But this time I want
It's a
to
real
make sure
thing.
people know where they can find us on social media, on Discord, wherever. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to connect, I'm on Hugo's Desk, both on Twitter, Facebook, and also Instagram. I also have my private Twitter, which is Hugo C. Guerra, if you want to go and check it out. And of course, my YouTube channel, Hugo's Desk as well. I have 2 YouTube channels, a Hugo's Desk Normal, which is the when I have my own main videos, and I have Hugo's Desk Live, where I put my streams, my full-length streams that I do on Twitch, Hugo's Desk on Twitch as well. And if anyone is interested, I also have a nuke compositing course, which I have available on Patreon as well. So normally it's Hugo's Desk, but sometimes it's Hugo C. Guerra as well. If you want to find me and connect, come and say hello.
Awesome. And you can, of course, find me at beforesandafters.com. Twitter, I'm at Ian Fails. One of the things I just wanted to give a quick shout out is I've gone podcast crazy.
Yeah.
And aside from VFX Notes with Hugo, I also have a podcast called VFX Firsts. And I just launched one called VFX Artifacts.
Yeah.
And there's actually going to be another one coming very soon. So check out those podcasts. I hope you enjoy them. I really love recording them. Hugo, what a fun episode. Thank you so much again. We're going to be back for episode 3 in about 2 weeks, everybody.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks,
you.
Hugo.
Bye. Thanks so much, everyone.
See ya.